Welcome to Chilling Tales to Tell at Night. I'm your host, Xander, and tonight we have a few spooky stories to share with you all. Before we begin, I just want to take a quick moment to thank you all for coming out. If many of you can remember, this past summer during our our camp Screamix event, we did a storytelling, campfire thing, where I read some stories from Norse mythology and some creepy stories. And for this month, for Internet Screamix, we thought we'd come out here and do another one. This time, I'm not alone. I am joined by Kristen, Moon, and Phil. And we each have some stories we'd like to tell you tonight. I will be providing background music where necessary, ambiance if needed, and I will tell a story myself when the moment's right. But all the same, welcome to Chilling Tales to Tell at Night. Coming up next, we have Phil, bringing a healthy dash of Edgar Allan Poe to the mix. Stay tuned.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my books a cease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." Yes, I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven, of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mine of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art short no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on this night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marvelled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast above the sculpted bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour, nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster to his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking I betook myself to linking, fancy unto fancy thinking, what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lighting with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, and nepenthe from these memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempest sent or whether tempest topped here thee ashore, desolate yet undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gallia? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by the heaven bent above us, by the God we both adore, tell this soul is sorrow laden, if within the distant Aiden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, who the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of thy lie, thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of the demon that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. and my soul from out that shadow lies a-floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore.
Indeed, strange things seem to be afoot when we last left our story in Penpal. For those of you who tuned along in my campfire story, you might remember I ended it with a particular creepy tale of a boy waking up in the woods, lost, cold, and afraid. Upon arriving home, into the welcoming arms of his mother and the confused stare of a few police officers, he had been told he ran away from home, that they found his note. Upon reading this supposed note, our young author discovered that it was not written by him. And tonight we continue that tale in the next story in Penpal, Balloons. When I was 5 years old, I went to an elementary school that, from what I've come to understand, was really adamant about learning through activity. The school was part of a new program designed to allow children to rise at their own pace, and to facilitate this, the administration encouraged teachers to come up with inventive and engaging lesson plans. Part of the underlying rationale, I think, was that if the teachers could trick the students into forgetting that they were at school, or that they were doing homework, students would be more enthusiastic about their work. Moreover, if the students cultivated an eagerness for school right out of the gate, then the general apathy that has its way of creeping into most students as the years go by could be staved off. To this end, each teacher was given the latitude to create his or her own themes that would run for the duration of the grade. And all the lessons in math, reading, etc. would be designed in the spirit of the theme. These themes were called groups. There was a space group, a sea group, an earth group, and the group I was in, community. Regardless of the creativity of the curriculum, in kindergarten in the United States, aside from very basic writing skills, you don't learn much except how to tie your shoes and how to share. And as a result of that, most of the grade isn't very memorable. This is particularly true if you enter kindergarten with most of the writing skills they expect you to develop by the time you have exited. As one of the students who was in this position, I find that I look back now, I remember the people fairly well, but the actual curriculum remains mostly a mystery to me. But perhaps this isn't all that unusual. I do remember two things very clearly. I was the best at writing my name in the correct way, which I had mastered sometime before entering the grade, and the balloon project, which was really the hallmark of the community group, since it was a clever way to show how a community functioned at a very basic level. The concept of the balloon project was fairly straightforward. Each student would release a balloon with a note attached, and then would wait for a response from whoever happened to find the balloon. We would ask them to enclose a picture of their area, if possible, and provide a return address so we could become pen pals. The teacher would post each picture on a large map that she had hung on one of the walls in the classroom, and this would help us see not merely how far the balloon had traveled, but how important communication was in bringing a community together. I remember our project being on a Friday, because the culmination of weeks of discussion and preparation for this exciting event made it feel as if I was having a 3-day weekend. The rocky start with which I had begun kindergarten had finally smoothed, and I talked excitedly with my friend Josh each day as we eagerly awaited the Friday launch. The morning of the launch, all the students walked into the classroom and saw that there was a fully inflated helium balloon tied off with ribbon taped to each desk. Our tables were laid out in a grid, and so the balloons had the same arrangement as planted trees in a lot. From the right angle, they would all line up. If you moved just a little to your left or right, they would fan out, and you could see them all again. We had known about this project since the first week of class, so we had known, at least abstractly, what to expect on Balloon Day. Despite this foreknowledge, however, walking into a classroom full of balloons gave the room the same ambience as that of a birthday party. In their response, the kids behaved as if it were one. The balloons were all different colors, and upon seeing this, the students began bartering heatedly with one another for their favorite colors almost immediately. It took the teacher much longer than normal to organize and stifle the students, but gradually we were subdued at our desks and were asked to take out our assignments for that day. The preceding Friday, the teacher had us sent home with instructions to write a note with our parents' assistance. All of the notes had to follow a loose structure, but we were allowed to be creative within those boundaries. My note read something like this. Hi, you found my balloon. My name is Dathan, and I attend Henderson Elementary School. You can keep the balloon, but I hope you write me back. I like Mighty Max, exploring, building forts, swimming, and friends. What do you like? Write me back soon. Here is $1 for the mail. At the bottom of the page, I drew a little stick figure saying, "Hi," in a word bubble next to his head, and after a few moments of consideration, I drew a balloon in his hand. On the $1 that I brought home from home, I had written 4 stamps right across the front, which my mom said was unnecessary, but I thought it was genius, so I did it. Sitting on each of our desks was a marker, a pen, a piece of paper, and an envelope. The first part of the project for the day was to transcribe the notes we had composed at home, after which we would put it in the envelope and attach it to the balloon. If we wanted to, we could draw a picture on it. There was a palette of paint with some brushes and cups of water sitting on a long table just in front of the teacher's desk, for the kids who elected to paint a picture on their note. It was a sunny day, and those who wished to paint on their note were told to finish by a certain time so the letters could be sent out to dry in the sun. Only a handful of kids were brave enough to send their art out into the world. After the teacher had finished giving us our instructions, most of my peers resumed their rowdy attempt at trading balloons, while the teacher began assisting the few students who had forgotten to bring their letters to class. As for me, I started on my note immediately. I didn't want it to be sloppy. My handwriting, at least back then, was quite nice. With the guidance of my mother, I had been practicing writing while simultaneously learning how to read for a fair amount of time before I'd begun kindergarten. Since the letter was already written, all that was left for me to do was copy it down verbatim. I had broken my left arm some weeks before. The plaster cast made it difficult to reposition and steady the paper as I went. But finally, I simply laid the heavy arm on the paper, leaned on it, and began transcribing, feeling thankful that I was right-handed. I took care with each stroke of the pen because I knew that I wouldn't be able to erase. I had never written anything important in pen before. Everything of any consequence that I had ever marked on a page was only as permanent as I wanted it to be. But now, each straight or curved line I marred the paper with had a tint of finality in it, and this only served to threaten the stability of my penmanship even more. But this was the way it had to be. Several years before, when the students were still writing their notes in pencil, there had been a storm the day after the balloons were released. Virtually no letters were mailed back, although there was no way to determine exactly why that had been. It was suggested that the pencil marks washed out much too easily, and so to be safe, we should use ink from that point on. I drew the last line on the paper and sat back with satisfaction. I interrupted my teacher's conference with another student to show her the letter, and she approved enthusiastically and sent me back to my seat. With my remaining time, I took to decorating the balloon. Mine was red, and that suited me just fine. With no interest in trading my balloon for another color, I tried to think of what I could draw on it. I decided that Spider-Man would make the most sense. I got to work and spent about 2 minutes trying to figure out how to draw Spider-Man's head before I realized that it was impossible. Deciding that a plain balloon was actually better than one with a drawing on it, I put the marker away and went to talk to my best friend Josh. It usually took him a little longer to write things because he was left-handed and would occasionally smudge what he had just written as his hand moved against the paper from left to right. I went over to him that day, partially to help him, but mostly because I wanted to invite him to my house after school for what would have been our first sleepover. When the teacher told us to return to our desks, I walked back, but froze as my letter came into view. It was wet. I looked around to see if someone might betray himself by laughing, but all of my peers were sitting attentively at their desk now. I craned my neck over their workspaces and saw that quite a few kids had painted pictures. I realized that someone who must have been trying to dry a paintbrush had carelessly sprinkled water droplets onto my note. The ink had already begun to run in outward arcs where the water touched it. The letter was still legible in parts, but some words were nearly obliterated. Others were simply incomprehensible. Rather than being a fan of exploring, according to my letter, I was an avid explarding enthusiast. I wanted to know who did this. I felt that I had put more effort into writing that letter than any of my peers, and so for someone to so carelessly deface it was unthinkable. There were so many kids who had painted pictures on their notes, and that it would take too long to attempt to figure out who might have vandalized my letter. Attempting to repair, or at least minimize the damage, seemed most pressing. There was no time to recreate the letter in its entirety. I thought about rewriting just the damaged parts, but if I crossed them out and tried again, my pen pal would think that I didn't know how to spell. I reassured myself that there would be other letters and other chances and walked quietly to the table where the paints were. I tore off a paper towel and tried to dry off the note as best as I could without smearing the reanimated ink. The teacher called us alphabetically to the far side of the classroom. One by one, we stood in front of a wall-sized map of the city and smiled with our balloon tethers held tightly in our fists. The mechanical whirring of the Polaroid camera repeated as each of us had our picture taken. After the film began to develop, we put out the photographs in our envelopes along with our letters. The teacher handed each of us another letter to enclose, which I imagined explained the nature of the project while also expressing appreciation for their participation in it. The Penpals would have been provided with the mailing address of the school and asked to mail their letters promptly so that the project could progress. That was the whole project. Doing these simple things would allow us to build a sense of community without having to leave the school, and do it safely. We would also practice our reading and writing through our correspondence without even realizing we were doing schoolwork. Everyone, faculty and students alike, loved this project, and it had been a huge success every year, with the exception of the year it stormed. We marched single file out of the back door of the classroom and into the courtyard outside. Keeping our formation, we pressed our backs against the wall of the building so that we could pose for a group photograph. One of the students, a boy named Chris, had become so excited upon exiting the classroom that, as soon as he saw the sky above, he let his balloon go and started cheering. I think his enthusiasm would have spread quickly if the teacher had been a little slower in scolding him. "Now you're going to be the only one in the picture without a balloon, Chris," she snapped. The boy started to cry. He had a sore throat, so his complaints were hoarse and raspy. I remember thinking that he sounded funny, and I suppose there's some justice in the fact that I caught his sore throat a couple days later. I would like to say that in demonstration of solidarity, at least one other student let a balloon go, or even better, that we all let ours go and stood by Chris, balloonless and proud. But this was kindergarten. Most of the kids stood there with their strained amusement, while others had advertised just how funny they found Chris's plight. In the end, Chris sulked at the very edge of the group picture and held his hand out of frame, clutching an imaginary balloon with a frown etched so firmly in his face that it seemed like it just might outlast the lifetime of the picture that he was posing for. After the photo was taken, we formed a circle around the teacher who had said a few things about friendship and community that I imagine went mostly unheard by the students, whose attention was now myopically focused on loosening the grip on their balloon tethers. When her speech was finally over, the countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.5. There was a collective groan in protest. She did this frequently. Although we didn't know what this number was, we knew that it was a way of stalling. 1! All at once, each kid yelled whatever their chosen launch word was, and the courtyard became a carnival as 24 brightly colored floating balls filled the sky. We ran, chasing our balloons, and tried desperately to distinguish them from other ones of the same color. Cross currents and updrafts flung the balloon wildly in different directions, and their human counterparts mirrored their movement on the ground below. Excuse me. Several kids collided with one another as they ran frantically chasing their balloons, but instead of fights, there were laughs. Despite the ruckus, I heard a rogue "blast off!" and shot my eyes down from the sky to see Chris releasing a bright green balloon that the teacher had just given him so that he could participate. As the balloons reached ever upwards, it became almost impossible to track my own balloon, and this brought with it a new kind of excitement. Where would it go? Who would find it? I remember that day so clearly. When I think about it, I can almost feel a phantom sun on my face, and can sometimes, just faintly, smell my teacher's perfume. It was one of the happiest days I'd ever had. Over the next couple of weeks, the letters started to roll in. Most of the notes came, as requested, with pictures of different landmarks, and the teacher would pin each picture on the big wall map that we had taken our Polaroids in front of. Arranging them directly on the map made it easy to see where the letter had come from and just how far the balloon had traveled. We did this at the very beginning of class each day, which was really a smart idea, because we actually looked forward to coming to school to see if our letters had come in. For the duration of the year, we would have 1 day a week where we could write back to our pen pal, or another student's pen pal, in case our letter had not come in. Day after day, I arrived at school excited but left dejected at the fact my letter hadn't arrived. There were other students who didn't receive letters either. Not every balloon would be found, and this was something the teacher had reminded us frequently. But this fact didn't offer me any consolation. I worried that all my hard work would have just been for nothing, and I started to resign myself to the idea that I would have to write to one of my peers' pen pals if I wanted to have anyone to write to at all. But then, one day, it came. My letter was one of the last to arrive. Upon entering the classroom, I looked at my desk and saw that, once again, there was no letter waiting for me. But as I sat down, the teacher approached me and asked me about the letter I had written. She asked me if I remembered what I had sent away with the balloon. I was a bit taken aback. I told her about what I wrote, and about the dollar, and about the drawing. When I finished, she brought her hand from behind her back and said with a smile, "I think this is for you, then." I was delirious with excitement. And my confusion regarding her questions about the letter I had sent ended when I saw the envelope. On the back, right over the seal, there was a drawing of a stick figure holding a balloon, just like the one I had drawn. The letter really was for me. I must have looked ecstatic, because as I was about to open it, she put her hand on mine to stop me and said, "Please don't be upset." I didn't understand what she meant. Why would I be upset now that my letter had come? I was mystified that she would even know what was in the envelope, but of course, I know now that she had screened the contents to make sure there was nothing obscene. But sitting at that desk, I was baffled by her concern that I would be disappointed. My balloon hadn't gotten lost. The person who had found it hadn't just thrown my letter away. All other possible details seemed negligible and insignificant to me. But when I opened the envelope, I understood her reaction. There was no letter. The only thing in the envelope was a Polaroid, but I couldn't make out what the image was. It looked like a patch of desert, but it was too blurry to decipher. It appeared as if the camera had been moved while the picture was being taken. I turned the Polaroid over. There was nothing on the back. It was just a Polaroid, and nothing more. There wasn't even a return address. I realized that I wouldn't be able to write back, and since there was no way to tell where the picture was taken, it couldn't even be placed anywhere on the map. Instead, my teacher tacked it on the side of the map next to the compass rose, out of the way, but still a part of the project. I was crushed. When I got home, my mom asked me how my day was. And so I told her. I told her I had gotten a letter from my pen pal, and she became visibly excited. I think she may have always known that I might never get a response, and as time went on, and my potential contact remained silent, her consolation shifted from optimism and possibility and potential to realism and acceptance. So when I actually received something, she was both shocked and overjoyed for me, since she knew how badly I had wanted someone to write me back. When I told her that there was no letter, only a Polaroid, she joked that maybe my pen pal had had bad handwriting, and was embarrassed at her seeing how good mine was. I didn't think that this was actually the case. My letter had been damaged before it even touched the sky, but my mother's words always seemed to have the ability to make me feel better. So I accepted her rationale, and I felt happy that I had gotten anything at all. The school year pressed on, and the letters had stopped coming for nearly all of the other students. After all, you can only continue writing as correspondence with a kindergartner for so long. This was expected by the teacher, and the lull was worked into the curriculum. Our Friday letter writing, including Our Friday letter writing sessions slowly morphed into other projects, and everyone, including myself, had lost interest in the letters almost completely. I still thought about the picture from time to time. In some way, I felt as if I had been cheated. But then again, there were students who had received nothing at all because their balloons had apparently been lost or disregarded. Recognizing this, I realized that I would seem greedy to those kids, and so anytime I felt compelled to complain, I would bite my tongue. Gradually, I internalized this pretended acceptance and simply moved on both in appearance and thought. Until I got another envelope. My excitement was rejuvenated fully, and I secretly reveled in the fact that I had just gotten a letter while nearly all of the other pen pals had abandoned their involvement. Most of my classmates had written back and forth with their pen pals several times, and the ones who received nothing at all were probably the victims of bad weather and bad luck. The first envelope I had received, however, was tantamount to someone laughing in my face. It seemed as if someone had gone through just enough trouble to let me know that he didn't care. Holding the correspondence in my hand validated the objections to the original arrival. It made sense that I received another delivery. There had been nothing but a blurry picture in the first one. This was probably to make up for that. But again, there was no letter at all. Just another picture. This one was more distinguishable, but not fully comprehensible. The camera was sharply angled toward the sky. The photograph caught the top corner of a building in the bottom left of the frame. But the rest of the image was distorted by a lens flare from the sun. I turned the Polaroid over, but again there was nothing written on the back. My teacher put her hands on my shoulder and said, "A picture's worth 1,000 words, right?" before walking away toward her desk. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I had never heard that said before, and I sat there for a while trying to decide if I believed it. Because the balloons didn't travel very far, and because they were all launched on the same day, the board became a bit cluttered fairly quickly. If a letter came in with a picture of a place that wasn't already overrepresented on the map, it would be displayed, but otherwise the correspondences were distributed to their recipients so we could take them home as keepsakes of the project. A week or two before the school year ended, the remaining pictures were taken off the map and handed out to their owners. My best friend Josh took home the second highest number of pictures at the end of the year. His pen pal was very cooperative and sent him photographs from all around the neighboring city. Josh took home, I think, 4 Polaroids? I took home nearly 50. The envelopes had all been opened by the teacher, but after a while, I had stopped even looking at the pictures. However, the photographs were, if nothing else, a collection, and so I saved them in one of my dresser drawers that housed my other collections. The problem with collections, I had found, was that either there was simply no way to gather all the things in a series because there was no end to it, or there would always be that last item that made your collection incomplete. In my mind, I suppose, the things in the collection weren't as valuable as the completeness of the collection itself. My drawer was a mausoleum of my incomplete collections of rocks, baseball cards, comic book cards, and little miniature baseball batting helmets that my mother and I would ceremoniously buy from a vending machine at Winn-Dixie after T-ball games. I put the photos in a box and slid it next to my baseball cards. With the school year over and summer break just beginning, I turned my attention to other things. For Christmas, midway through my year of kindergarten, my mom had gotten me a small snow cone machine. It didn't make very good snow cones, but the fact that I could make them at home now delighted both Josh and me. He came to covet the machine so much that his parents bought him a slightly nicer one for his birthday toward the end of the school year. The snow cones produced by Josh's machine were much bigger and were made much faster than when we could use my machine. Several weeks into the summer break, we decided to take a break from exploring the woods. We would pool our resources and set up a snow cone stand to make money. We thought we would make a fortune selling snow cones at just $1. Josh and I lived in different neighborhoods, so we had a conversation about where we could set up shop. As one might have expected, we both wanted to locate the business at our respective houses. Before we even had the cups for the shaved ice, we had our first disagreement. His neighborhood was a bit nicer than mine, but many of the older houses in my neighborhood had slightly larger yards, and as such, the people who actually cared for them had to be outside for longer amounts of time in order to do so. There was also simply more people in my neighborhood, since there were many houses that stood on fairly small plots of land, and the ongoing construction around where I had lived meant that there were always people outside on the weekends. Josh rebutted, claiming that his neighborhood was nicer than mine was, and this was a thought that had never occurred to me before. I became indignant, and our capacities to engage in a civil and rational discussion became exhausted. Ultimately, I won, by trumping all of Josh's legitimate reasons by exclaiming that it was my idea, and so we should do it at my house. The first weekend was a disaster. We had used our machines before, but to be quite honest, we simply weren't very good snow cone producers. We had 2 bottles of syrup, cherry and cherry. So there wasn't too much in variety in terms of flavor. More to our detriment, we had never completely figured out how to best pour the syrup onto the ice, or how much to pour for that matter, so most of our customers had their hands covered in overflowing red dye when they squeezed the paper cups to take their snow cones away. We made about $6 and stopped for the day. We didn't fare much better the second weekend. Josh and I had gotten the hang of the syrup for the most part, but I had the idea that we should use crushed ice in the machines in order to make the snow cones more quickly, since I thought that smaller chunks of ice would shave faster. Instead, the crushed ice became jammed between the blades and the plastic rotor inside the machine broke, and my snow cone maker immediately. This machine was one of the nicest things that I had owned, and so I became flustered when I couldn't get it to work. I took the top off and looked inside. I could see the chunks of ice that were jamming the blades, and so I picked up the plastic case and banged it on the table a few times in an attempt to dislodge them. Looking up, I could see a potential customer coming. I needed to clear the jam quickly. Without thinking, I pushed my hand down into the cavity of the snow cone machine and began carefully wrestling the ice out of the space between the blades and the inside wall. I looked up again, and I recognized the person from the weekend before, forgetting that Josh's machine was working fine. I turned my attention back to the problem so that I could be ready for our first return customer. I could feel that the ice began to give and pivot a little as the heat from my fingers melted it. I almost had the problem resolved when I heard Josh say, "Hey, what's this button do?" I looked over to Josh and saw that he had his finger on the start button of my machine. Reflexively, I yanked my hand out of my snow cone maker, my middle finger catching the blade on the way out. There was a period of just a few seconds where I thought that I had scratched myself, but a thin red line soon began to quickly draw itself horizontally along the underside of my finger. I watched as that line widened and spread as blood began dripping from my hand. I shouted at Josh while he prepared a snow cone on the machine for our anticipated customer, and he said that he was only joking, that he wasn't really going to push the button. He looked genuinely remorseful from what I could tell, though he seemed to have a problem looking at my hand as he apologized. I think now that Josh had a fear of blood. Josh had already finished pouring the syrup before the customer got to the table, and he held it gingerly so that it wouldn't melt. Holding my finger with the opposite hand, I looked around for something to wrap it in. By the time the customer got to our stand, the blood had welled up in the tight fist that I was making around my finger and had begun dripping down my forearm. As Josh held the snow cone out to the man, I saw our patron's eyes dart back and forth from the cherry red ice to my blood-red hand. His expression changed from concern to amusement, and finally he said, "You boys sure have put a lot of yourself into this business." The man followed this exclamation with a guffaw so long and loud that I could still hear it when I went back into my house to show my mom what I had done to myself. When I got back outside, Josh said that the man had bought the snow cone. We decided to quit while we were ahead, so we packed up and went inside. It turned out that my machine wasn't irreparably damaged. Once the ice melted, the jam was cleared, and it began to work again without difficulty. This was good news, because business picked up the following weekend. Josh and I had taken a substantial break from our explorations in the woods due to a patch of trees that blocked our path, and during that hiatus, I made a new sign that said in big, bold letters, "Free snow cones." Josh said matter-of-factly that we weren't just going to give snow cones away, and I laughed as I pointed at what I had written in faint pencil just under the advertisement. Just kidding. My neighbor, an elderly woman named Ms. Maggie, was our first customer that day. She pretended to be outraged by our ruse, but happily paid us. Before she left, she told us that she would look for us in the lake later that day if we decided to go swimming. We had many more customers that day, and they were all good sports about our trick, including the man who returned for a third time. We made $18 that day, and a little less the following weekend. The fifth weekend would turn out to be our last day of business. My mom would take the snow cone machine away only a couple days later. When I protested, she told me that she didn't want me cutting my hand off, although I had injured myself weeks ago. Even that age, I thought that this late reaction was bizarre. Because Josh and I both had a snow cone machine, we each had a separate stack of money that we put together into one pile, and then we split it evenly. When there was an odd number of bills, we would play paper, rock, scissors to see who would get to keep the extra bill. We call this decision-making ritual gaming. That day, we made a total of $17, primarily from the same people we had been selling to since we started our business. After we stopped selling for the day, Josh was divvying up the spoils, and as he paid out my fourth dollar, I was consumed by a feeling of profound bewilderment. The dollar said, 4 stamps. I must have vocalized my surprise, because Josh noticed my shock and asked if he had miscounted. No, the dollar. Josh, that's the dollar I sent. What? That's the dollar, man! The one I sent! What dollar? What are you talking about? Seeing the dollar here in my hands befuddled me, and I struggled to compose myself so I could explain more clearly. From the balloon! I sent it off with the balloon, remember? I put it in the envelope with my letter. Josh pondered this for a moment before deciding what this meant. That's so cool! He shouted. As I thought about it, I came to agree. The idea that the dollar had made it right back to me after changing hands so many times staggered me. I had no way of knowing how far the balloon had traveled, but whatever the distance had been, this was still amazing. Whoever found my balloon must have bought some stamps at the post office, and then slowly and incrementally, the dollar had worked its way right back to me. I rushed inside to tell my mom, but my excitement coupled with her distraction from an in-progress phone call made my story incomprehensible to her. To the point, she just responded simply by saying, "Oh, wow, that's neat," just to placate me. Frustrated, I ran back outside and told Josh I had something to show him. We thundered up the steps to my front door and ran immediately to my room. I opened the collection drawer, took out the box of envelopes, and showed Josh some of the pictures. I started with the first picture, and we went through about 10 more before he lost interest in looking at poorly angled and meaningless Polaroids. I grew irritated with his disinterest. My Penpal had sent these pictures, and today, after countless transactions, the dollar he used to send the photographs had landed right back in my hand. This was almost too much for me to take in, the sheer improbability of it all. Even the most minor altercation would have changed things entirely. If Josh had paid the first dollar to himself, I probably would never have even noticed my returning defaced currency. Josh, however, had become completely disengaged and asked if I wanted to go play in the ditch before his mom came to pick him up. I responded with a distracted, almost dismissive agreement as I shuffled through the envelopes. I'm not sure how the routine was born, but the ditch had become a battleground to Josh and me. Nearly every time we stepped into the ditch, one of us would lob a clod of dirt at the other, and this would catalyze a full-scale assault in both directions. It probably started with a single playful toss of a dried mass of compacted dirt, but it became nearly impossible for us to step into that arena without almost instantly entering into a standoff. We enjoyed these battles so much and sought them out with such frequency that the ditch became the ditch without us ever noticing. That day was no exception to the rule of combat, but the war game was persistently interrupted by rustling in the woods around us. We were used to these sounds. There were raccoons and stray cats that lived in the woods by my house, but there seemed to be a little too much noise coming from the forest floor for it to be caused by either of those things. As we continued our battle, we traded guesses at the source of the ruckus in an attempt to scare one another. Playing games like these gradually evolved into the games I would play by myself when exiting the woods as the sun rolled away. My last guess was that it was a mummy, but in the end, Josh kept insisting that it was a robot because of the sounds that we heard. As we were leaving, I said that if it was a robot, it would have made much more noise, but Josh shook this off and became a little serious. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "You heard it, didn't you? It sounded like a robot. You heard it too, right?" I had heard it, and since it was sounding mechanical, I agree that it probably was a robot. It's only now, looking back, that I understand what we heard. When we got back to my house, Josh's mom was waiting for him at the dining room table with my mom. Josh told his mom about the robot, our moms laughed, and Josh went home. My mom and I ate dinner, and then I went to bed. I tried to sleep, but I was feeling restless. Josh might not have been interested in the photos, but after seeing that dollar, I could think of virtually nothing else. Before too long, I climbed down from the top bunk and took the box of envelopes out of my dresser drawer. I took out the first envelope, set it on the floor, and placed the blurry desert Polaroid that had been inside of it on top. I laid the second envelope right next to it and put the oddly angled Polaroid of a building's top corner over it. I did this with each picture until they formed a grid that was about 5 by 10. I was taught to always be careful with the things that I was collecting, even if I wasn't sure whether they were valuable or not. I realized that I hadn't actually looked at the majority of these pictures before. I may have paid them a passing glance when I opened the envelope to look for a letter, but upon being reliably disappointed, I would simply close the envelope and put it with the others. As I looked at them now, I noticed that the pictures gradually became more distinct. I scanned my eyes over the Polaroids. There was a tree with a bird on it, a speed limit sign, a power line, a group of people walking into some building. Right as my eyes were about to move on to the next photo in the sequence, they froze and focused on something that vexed me so powerfully that I can now, as I write this, distinctly remember feeling dizzy and capable of only a single repeating thought. Why am I in this picture? In the photograph of the group of people entering the building, I saw myself holding hands with my mother in the very back of the crowd of people. We were at the very edge of the photo, but it was us. As my eyes swam over the sea of Polaroids, I became increasingly anxious. It was a really odd feeling. It wasn't fear. It was the feeling you get when you are in trouble. I'm not sure why I was flooded with that feeling, but there I sat, floundering in the distinct sense that I had done something wrong. This feeling only intensified as I finally managed to break my gaze and look at the rest of the pictures. I was in every photo. None of them were close shots. None of them were only of me, but I was in every single one of them. Off to the side, in the back of a group, at the bottom of the frame. Some of the pictures had only the tiniest part of my face captured, at the very edge of the photo, but nevertheless, I was there. I was always there. For a moment, I tried to imagine this whole thing as one tremendous coincidence, but I knew that it wasn't, and I sat there, stunned. I didn't know what to do. Your mind works in a funny way as a kid. There was a large part of me that was afraid of getting in trouble simply for still being awake. I wanted to wake up my mother, I wanted to tell her that there was something wrong here. I wanted to run into her bedroom and throw the pictures onto her comforter and just shout, "Look!" and have her hug me and tell me that everything was going to be fine, that I had nothing to be afraid of. But I just sat there with the looming feeling of having made some irreparable transgression. I decided that I would wait until the morning. The next day, my mom was off work and spent most of the morning cleaning up around the house. I stared blankly at the cartoons on the television and waited until I thought it was a good time to show her the Polaroids. When she went out to get the mail, I grabbed a couple of the pictures and put them on the table in front of me. I sat waiting for her to come back in. I couldn't even think of how to begin, and I dug my fingernails into the chipping paint of the table as I tried desperately to think of the perfect way to explain everything. When she returned, she was already opening the mail. I heard her throw some junk mail into a trash can, and I took a deep breath and forced the words out of my mouth. "Mom, can you come here? I have these pictures. Just give me a minute, honey. I need to mark these on my calendar." After a moment, she came and stood behind me and asked me what I needed. I could hear her shuffling with the mail. I just looked at the Polaroids and told her about them. I reminded her about the balloon project and how I'd only gotten a picture in my first correspondence. I told her that after that one, they just kept coming, but I never said anything because they were just stupid pictures. I dug my fingernails harder into the table and told her that I had saved them all and had gotten so excited when the dollar came back that I stayed up late looking at the photos. As I went on into my explanation and pointed out the pictures, her frequent uh-huhs and okays decreased, and she was suddenly completely quiet and making only a little noise with the mail. I had run out of things to say, but I couldn't turn around and face her. I waited for her to say something, but the next noise I heard from her sounded as if she were trying to catch her breath in a room that had no air left in it. At last, she subdued her struggling gasps and simply dropped the remaining mail on the table right next to me and ran to the kitchen to get the cordless phone. "Mom, I'm sorry! I didn't know about these! Don't be mad at me!" With the phone pressed to her ear, she was alternating running and walking back and forth while shouting into the mouthpiece. I couldn't understand what she was saying or who she could be calling. Was it my teacher? No. This wasn't her fault. I nervously fiddled with the mail that was sitting next to the Polaroids I had arranged. The top envelope had something sticking out of it that I thoughtlessly and anxiously pulled on until it came out. It was another Polaroid. Confused, I thought that somehow one of my Polaroids had slipped into the stack when she threw the mail down. But when I turned it over and looked at it, I realized that I had not seen this one before. It was me, but this one was a much closer shot. I was surrounded by trees and was smiling. But it wasn't just me. Josh was there too. I felt my mouth go dry as I realized that this was of us, from yesterday. I started yelling for my mom, who was still screaming into the phone. As I called to her more loudly, she shouted more loudly into the phone to compensate, and this exchange repeated until finally she responded with, "What?" Suddenly, I had her attention, but I didn't know what to do with it. I could only think to ask, "Who are you calling?" "I'm talking with the police, honey." "But why? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do anything. Please, Mom." She answered me with a response that I never understood until I was forced to revisit these events from the earliest years of my life. She grabbed the envelope off the table, and the picture of Josh and I spun and slid, landing next to the other Polaroids in front of me. She held the front of the envelope up to my eyes, but I could only look at her and watch as all the color began draining out of her face, as if something was siphoning the life right out of her. With tears welling up in her eyes, she said that she had to call the police because there was no postmark. and we'll be taking a short break. Coming up next, Moon and Kristen have some disturbing and eldritch tales to tell. More after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Chilling Tales to Tell at Night. Coming up next, we have a story of strange summer occurrences in a small town, as read by our very own Upgraded Moon. Stay tuned in just a moment, for the horror is about to begin.
If there's one thing I hate in the summer, it's insects. I don't know why, but when it's hot, our small town is flooded by all sorts of creepy crawlies. It could be because of the various lakes nearby, or that our town is nestled between thick forests. Every summer, things are bad, but this year's heat wave made it even worse. Flies and mosquitoes were swarming my house almost since the beginning of July. Every time I'd open a window, you could bet that half a dozen of them made their ways inside. Don't even get me started on the spiders. Worst of all were the bees. I don't know where they all came from, but for a month now they're plaguing our town. During the first week, no one was worried about it. Most people guessed that the heat had sped up the breeding process, and soon enough their numbers would thin out. Instead, more of them started appearing. It wasn't long before bee stings became a common occurrence when going outside. Stranger even was that a second, different type of bee appeared. They had bigger bodies that were a bit too long, and were much more aggressive than regular bees. And at first, people thought they were hornets or wasps, but that wasn't the case. They were some type of local mutation. Things got especially dangerous at the local nursing home or kindergarten. The elderly and the kids were too slow to notice the bees, and many of them got stung. Insect spray became as common as bread and water in our town due to those aggressive bees. Even I got a can. 2 weeks ago, this epidemic claimed its first victim. It was a middle-aged woman who went out running. When her husband protested, she disregarded the warning and said she'd be fine. Her body was found on the same day. A local farmer found it in a ditch near a hiking trail early in the evening. No one knew what had happened. When the man approached the body, it was teeming with bees. Her face and arms were covered in bee stings and almost swollen beyond recognition. When my friend Robert went missing, I was worried instantly. He was precisely the type who'd ignore the warnings and the danger. His girlfriend Sue called me Saturday morning. She'd not heard from him since Friday afternoon. This wasn't like him at all, she said. With all those bees around, only God knew what would happen. I calmed her down and told her he was most likely busy playing some new game. Once I hung up, I tried to call Robert. No one answered. I dropped him a message on WhatsApp and saw that he'd not been online since yesterday. That really wasn't like him. He was the type who was online constantly. I drove to his place right away. I rang the doorbell a few times, but got no answer. His neighbor soon called out to me and told me he'd not seen my friend all day. The last he'd seen him was yesterday. I felt a lump in my throat. I asked the man if he could have a look out and call me if he saw my friend come home. He was friendly enough, and he'd said he'd give me a call. Back at home, I had no idea what to do. I was about to call the cops, but what should I tell them? Robert had been drinking out with friends all night for all I knew. He'd probably drop me a WhatsApp message soon enough asking what I was so worried about. 2 hours later, I got a call from his neighbor. The old man told Robert had come home. His clothes were dirty, though, and he looked scruffy and exhausted. Robert didn't even react when the old man called out to him. He just went inside without saying a word. I was so glad to hear he was all right. I tried calling him again, but again, I couldn't reach him. My messages stayed unread, too. Shit. What if something had happened and he'd passed out? When I arrived, it took Robert a little while, but he opened the door. He didn't say a word, and he stood there, staring at me. Hey, man, you all right? I was worried about you. He just kept staring at me. For a moment, he opened his mouth as if to say something, only to quickly close it again. Finally, he stepped aside to let me in. As I walked past him, I noticed how bad he smelled. Dude, what the hell did you do last night? You should take a shower or something. No reaction. Robert quietly closed the front door and walked straight towards the living room. Something was off about the way he moved. He seemed to take a short pause before each step as if to think about it. His feet shuffled over the floor and looked as if he dragged his body forward. Why was he so exhausted? Dude, are you sure you're all right? I asked as I followed him. Instead of answering, he sat down on his couch and kept staring at me. I was about to call him out on his behavior when I heard the buzzing of bees. I couldn't say where it was coming from and started scanning the room. I was sick and tired of the damn bees by now. I'd gotten so many bee stings that I killed them on sight. I couldn't see any, though. I suddenly felt a stinging pain on my arm and noticed that one of the weirder, bigger bees had stung me. There was already another one coming towards me. Where the hell were they coming from? It sat down on my arm, and for a moment it seemed as if it was looking straight into my eyes. That was it. I got out the can from my backpack and started to spray it. Wouldn't let it sting me too. At this moment, Robert started to squeak. It was this weird high-pitched sound, and in surprise, I turned towards him. He gotten up from his seat. Dude, I broke up because he came tumbling towards me and crashed his body into mine with full force. What the fuck is going on with you? Calm down, man. His anger was more of the angry squeaking. He started to push me to the ground. And in that instant, I heard the buzzing of bees again. It was even louder this time, but I still couldn't see them. Where the hell was it coming from? Dude, stop. Enough with this. I said as I pushed him off me. Before I could get up, he came at me again. By now, I had enough of this and pushed him back hard with both hands. There was the sickening, wet sound of something breaking. Then Robert fell backwards to the ground. Oh shit, man. You alright? I didn't mean to. There was the buzzing again. This time loud enough to drown out my own voice. This time I knew where it was coming from. It was from inside my friend. I watched in horror as a swarm of bees burst from his open mouth and flew straight at me. I screamed and started to spray them, but there were too many. It must have been dozens of them. They were all around me. I felt countless bee stings all over my arms and on the back of my neck. In my fury, I used a spray can almost at random, spraying everywhere. The air in Robert's small living room became heavy with insecticides in a matter of minutes. As I fought the bees, I saw Robert's body shake and tremble as if he was suffering a stroke. He was squeaking again, tried to run out of the room, but crashed straight against the wall. I saw more and more of the bees crawl from his collapsed body, only to die right on the spot. I tore myself from the side and ran outside. I collapsed on the grass, coughing and swaying as the last bees still stuck to my body. Soon the police arrived. Robert's neighbor must have heard our fight and got worried. I told them what had happened, but they didn't believe me. While they interrogated me, an ambulance was called. As they treated my many bee stings, one of the officers approached me. He was clearly disturbed by what he'd seen. He told me that my friend was dead. When I started freaking out, he assured me that it wasn't due to our fight or the insect spray. No, he said my friend must have been dead for a while. This made no sense. I told the man again that my friend had come home only an hour or two ago. The man nodded, but the paramedics had said that Robert's body was in a state of advanced decay. There was no doubt that he had been dead for almost a day. When I gave my testimony at the station the next day, I learned more about the whole thing. The police officer opposite me frowned once I finished my story. He said he'd typically stay quiet about these things, but what they found during the autopsy was just too weird. My friend's head, as well as his body, was covered in holes and tunnels. It looked almost like the honeycombs in a beehive. It was clear that Robert had died on Friday afternoon near the forest, the man said. The strange bees must have then started to convert his body into a hive. No one could explain how he made his way home, though. It's now a week later. There's one thing I can't stop thinking about. What if it was those bees? What if they dug into his body to control him and moved their new hive here, right into the middle of our small town?
Coming up last, we have Kristen with an original story that she is going to read aloud for us on the last segment of tonight's chilling tales to tell at night. Stay tuned.
It has been 15 minutes and 21 seconds. That's what his watch tells him at any rate, and Jacob is smart enough to trust his tools if nothing else. He glances down at the GPS in his hands. Left, he says pointedly as he turns, footsteps echoing down the corridor. I told you this was stupid. Anna breathes from behind him, her small shoulders hunched against the cold. The wind breathes around them, rustles old book pages from the tome in her hands. He laughs. You're the one who told me the story. Yeah, because it's the time of year where you tell ghost stories over the goddamn campfire, she hisses. I didn't think you'd go all fucking ghost hunters on it. Jacob flashes a grin behind him. Come on, can't you see the news? 17-year-old finds proof of eldritch horror. Ah, yes, 17-year-old finds proof of cosmic horror and indifference. Truly, you're a legend. Her hand finds his, a warm squeeze trailing behind him. Come on, how long have you known me? He shrugs as he turns his gaze forward once more. You're right, I'm a legend. The flashlight carves a confident path before him, sharp against the dark. It can't be much further now. It has been 47 minutes and 34 seconds. God, this is stupid, Anna grumbles over the sound of her boots echoing through the corridor. I can't feel my toes. Uh-huh, Jacob says absently as he turns left, following the insistent beep of the GPS in his hands. Left again. They keep walking. There is silence aside from their breathing. So, Jacob says slowly. Does this hallway seem thinner to you? Anna responds noncommittally. Yeah, I'm right. Jacob nods to himself. The flashlight illuminates his footsteps, confident and loud. It's getting spooky now. That's a good sign. She laughs shakily. You're the only one who would ever say that. Damn right. How long have you known me? Her hand squeezes against his. She doesn't answer. It has been 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 42 seconds. The hallway has changed now. The walls are closer, but they've opened up in a sense, gradually fading from carefully placed stone to bookshelves. The scent of old parchment breathes around them as if calling to him. Jacob ignores them. There is still a path to follow, and he has to return to it. I want to go home. Anna's voice hisses out in a whisper, her shoulders raised as if to shield against the walls around them. Can't be much further now, Jacob mumbles over the beeping in his hands. Left again. We've had a lot of lefts, Anna points out. How many has it been? He doesn't answer. It has been 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 56 seconds. Jake, her voice is quieter now, more desperate. Jake, did you bring any food or anything? I didn't think it would take this long, he admits. Jake, her voice is more insistent. He squeezes her hand. It can't be much further now. How long has it been? It has been 5 hours, 13 minutes, and 20 seconds. His throat is dry now. His footsteps feel shaky, the pathway dimming ahead along with his flashlight. Left, he breathes out, and the wall of old parchment breathes with him. The GPS beeps. She says nothing. It has been 10 hours, 12 minutes, and 15 seconds. He's so tired. Left, he mumbles. Her grip is non-existent, cold, fading. How long has it been? The question presses in a way her grip does not. There is no answer. The darkness and parchment breathe behind him. It has been 8 hours, 35 minutes, and 7 seconds. He turns left. How long has it been? Her voice feels sharper now, a constant question twisting splinters into his mind. The light is gone. He has no answer. 20 hours, 10 minutes, And 10 minutes. 10 minutes. How long has it been? The question squeezes at his throat now. 15 hours, 15 minutes, 15, 15, 15, 15. How long has it been? 12, 12, 12, 12. 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5. The darkness breathes in. How long has it been, Jake? She asks. I don't know, he says through chapped lips. He can't breathe. How long have you known me, Jake? She kneels down in front of him. The darkness breathes out. I don't know. How long have we done this, Jake? Her fingers press against his skull, hard, insistent. How long have we been here, Jake? How long have I been waiting? I don't... His voice cracks. Why are you doing this? Why did you bring me here? Why? The darkness breathes. How long has it been? He doesn't have an answer. How long has it been since you checked out the movie What's Up, Tiger Lily from the library, Jake?
Thank you for tuning in to tonight's Chilling Tales to Tell at Night. I am your host, Xander. And next time, when the stars are out and the moon is full and the darkness is at its deepest, we will be here, ready to tell you more stories of terror and bone-chilling horror. Until then, this has been Chilling Tales to Tell at Night with Xander, Kristen, Moon, and Phil. Good night. Sleep tight. And farewell. Well, hello everyone.
Kristen, I can't fucking believe you. Oh no, we lost Kristen.
Oh no.
Kristen disappeared.
Kristen.
Oh, there you are.
Kristen, we can't be friends.
I can't believe you. Oh my
Thing
god.
Thing is, you want to know something. Want to know something interesting, Kristen?
What?
Towards the end, when you started calling him Jake, all I could think of was Jake from Jimmy John's, and I was like, fucking Jake. God damn it! Of course, he's called him Jake. And the fucking instant you started that sentence was, how long has it been since you booked? I was instantly enraptured in blinding rage. I want you to understand something, Kristen. I want you to understand very clearly and very precisely, and I want you to ingrain this into your very being and never let go of it. Hold it tight.
Okay.
I hate you.
Oh, that warms my cold, dead, non-existent heart.
Oh fuck.
God.
Oh man.
Here's some context. Let's talk about what happened this morning when Kristen sends me a message saying, "Hey, I wrote an original story. Could you like read it and tell me what you think of it?" And I was like, "Sure." I had shit I needed to do, so I got back to it a few hours later. Like she sent me that in the I guess earlier in the day, and then like I got to it like in the afternoon, and then I was reading through it. I'm like, okay, this is creepy. Weird. Don't know where this is going, but hey, that's the eldritch horror for you. It's like, how long has it been? What's up, God damn it, Kristen! God damn it!
I knew as soon as we were going to be doing story thing. Well, okay, I had a few ideas for stuff I wanted to do, to be honest, but I knew deep in my heart of hearts that as much as I wanted to write a scary story, I was going to have to make it a What's Up Tiger Lily story in the end.
No.
I had no choice.
You had no choice.
You had a plan in the beginning.
Yeah, I was the only one who knew. One who knew. Well, I knew because I planned the sad trombone sound effect.
I'm so just.
You know what, Kristen? You can actually go fuck yourself on multiple accounts. You goddamn hypocrite. Because you know, folks. In between, in that fucking break, Kristen went off on a mini spiel about how I should do more dramatic stuff because some bullshit about talent or whatever.
Well,
instead of all the dick jokes that I just do because I'm a meme. And then this fucking bitch over here uses her amazing talents for evil. For evil.
I don't know why this is a surprise to you.
One might say
what you were doing.
You knew.
Fuck.
Did you guys like it until I got to the shitty joke?
I liked it. Okay, I liked where it was going. The thing is, I was listening. I was like, oh fuck, this is actually. Well, this is really unsettling. Oh fuck, this is some eldritch shit going on. Oh damn, Jake from Jimmy John. Wait, no, it's Jake from Jimmy John.
The most terrifying of revelations.
The big eldritch horror is Jake and What's Up Tiger Lily.
You were the chosen one, Kristen, says ND-Watt22. I know, I betrayed everyone. I'm sorry.
But Jake, you were in Jimmy John's all along.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you didn't have this suddenly, like they just walk out of the bathroom in Jimmy John.
That would be too obvious.
Too meta.
Hilarious.
I'm like, how can I do this subtly? They're in a library. They're in an eldritch library, and his name is Jake.
Yep.
God.
Oh man.
This seething anger is going to keep me awake for a few hours. God damn it.
I just want to call something to attention.
Mm-hmm.
Phil, your delivery was absolutely fucking pristine.
Wonderful.
Genuinely.
I never heard you do that before up until like this very evening. And like, frankly, I am just like so ecstatic about it because it was like I was sitting there with like a big smile on my face because I was like, this is fucking awesome.
It was amazing. Like, holy shit.
Fuck. Thank you. Thanks.
Fuck. Oh, holy shit. It was so good.
But only one story can take the trophy for tonight. I don't know about any trophy. I'm just
Yeah, I
making
was
the shit up
gonna
as I go. Surprise! It's a contest. Vote now on your phones.
And the
I think it's
biggest blue
just-
and the biggest blue ball goes to
Me.
Goes
Xander.
to Xander.
As I continue to tell increments of this story, and I think we can probably schedule another Chilling Tales to tell at night in the spoop month.
That's fun.
I'd probably go. I'd be down
Yeah.
with that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I'll be playing Amnesia on Friday next week.
Yes,
we
you
might
will.
find this on-
No,
Well,
wait,
next
no.
Friday's
next Fri-
TOA.
Actually,
Oh,
next
that's
Friday.
TOA.
Actually, next Friday might not be TOA because I've had something come up on Friday, so I might need to
Oh.
reschedule.
I
Yeah,
guess we'll find out.
we shall see.
Mm.
We shall see.
I may or may not be playing Amnesia on Friday next week.
So,
Or
quick
Thursday.
question, Jordan: do you plan to play it on hard mode? The newly released hard mode?
So here's the thing. So I have never played Amnesia. I haven't even watched people play Amnesia. Like I think like the one thing that like really rekindled my interest was that PewDiePie recently started playing Amnesia because the hard mode thing came out. And like I watched like a couple episodes of the playthrough, which it's not a lot. Like there's a whole lot more to the story than that. And
yes.
like it just was appalling to me. Like I've seen so many Amnesia gameplay videos, but I don't know anything about the story.
I'm a complete Amnesia lore slut.
Like
Wait, that has lore. I thought it was just like.
Oh,
fuck
dude,
tons of
there is
shit.
a fucking
Weird shit.
detail. There's so much story behind
dude,
Amnesia.
there's so much shit
There's
in there.
so
man.
much.
Like it's
Like, don't even get me
shit.
started on the shit in Machine for Pigs either. Like that, there's a lot of layers there, man.
okay, but like here's the thing. So
Wow,
I've had Amnesia in my Steam library. I have both like Amnesia and a Machine for Pigs. I have both of them in my Steam library, and I haven't touched either of them yet.
Nice.
So I was
Fuck.
thinking, taking the so like I want to have people with me so that like we can experience this together. But like I want to fucking play this. Like I just want to play it so bad and like have people observe it happen. It's gonna be
Play it
fucking
like
baller.
God.
And I'm not great with horror games. I tend to panic once things like really start picking up.
That's how you know you'll be great for streaming.
Yeah, like when things start picking up, I'm going to be a little loud. Probably not like
Yeah.
microphone to my mouth, but like I'll be panicking. You guys will get to hear my panic. Which
But-
will
It'll
be
be
fun.
great.
All the same, I would like to know because we had mentioned Phil's story and we mentioned Kristen's fucking meme. But let's talk. Let's talk a little bit more in depth about the stories we told tonight. Talk about any specific bits you like from each other's stories. Anything else you want to discuss? I really think we should just dive into this because none of us, except for me and Kristen, I had only read Kristen's story. I didn't know really what everyone else was doing. I had given Moon his story. But I wasn't sure how he was gonna read it, and then I knew that Phil was gonna read The Raven. But you know, it's all like, you know, people read things in their own ways, so I'm excited to hear.
Wait a minute,
people-
hold on. Phoenix, did you fucking call me Juno again?
Oh, the entire stream.
How many fucking streams do we gotta go through?
That's it, Phoenix. I'm timing you out again.
Will this be being put on YouTube? I don't see why
Probably.
not. We don't have anything copyrighted in this.
I'd actually really
so-
like that if we did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah,
we may
fuck
as
it.
well.
I gotta say, Phil, at the end of your reading, whenever like you were just like really like feeling it, and you were
Oh,
like
yeah.
in that shit, and like at the end you were just hitting every single
Yeah.
syllable. It was like hard, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, like you started out so calming. I'm like, oh, this is so nice to listen to. I'm so relaxed. And then it just built and built. And by the time you got to the end, the emotion in your voice combined with like just the way every fucking line just had this snap to it. It was so fucking good. I
So good.
legitimately had chills.
I need to hear that shit
Nice.
more often, Phil.
Please
want
do
you to-
this more.
Thanks, guys.
I want you to read to me. I want you to read me bedtime stories, and
Please.
fucking put me to sleep. And if I'm not sleeping by the
Perfect.
time you finish that story, feel free to punch me in the face because it will be just as great.
Yeah, I do actually have another one. Actually, fun fact. And this is a little bit of, I guess you could consider it IR world building, but also an actual fucking true story. I have read JoJo some bedtime stories before because they were having trouble going to sleep. We were just on call, and I just started reading some Poe to them, and it actually fucking worked. And it's adorable because they fall asleep like a fucking baby. But I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was that one about, without spoiling too much about it, was the one where that guy was just slowly trying to come into this old guy's room to stab him because of his weird fucking eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that one.
The Telltale Heart.
Yep.
Yeah, that's one.
I remember
Telltale Heart. Didn't that studio shut down?
Oh fuck, you right. It will be missed.
Eat ass.
It won't. Fucking
segueing into our next story, Xander, your story has incredible build-up.
Oh yeah,
like that
writer's fucking like, and then like the way you delivered it.
Okay, yeah, actually, I wanted to mention this first. Obviously, I am gonna go to the nearest fucking bookshop and I'm gonna buy that shit because I can almost guarantee the pretentious piece of shit bookshop I have around here has that book because of course it has that fucking.
What's
book.
the name of the book and the author? Just to...
it's Penpal by Dathan Auerbach.
Nice. You know the chat kept saying Dathan. That can't be his name.
No, it's Dathan. It's Dathan.
Now we know.
D-A-T-H-A-N. Dathan.
Nice. But secondly, and vastly more importantly, Xander, you beautiful bastard. You SpongeBob-sounding motherfucker.
Watch it.
I often forget, due to the fact that you're a raging asshole, that you are an incredibly talented individual when it comes to acting and all that kind of stuff. So when you pull that shit, and I'm just constantly blown aback. I'm like, this is really... Wait, this is Xander speaking. Motherfucker, this is Xander.
Oh, shit.
I feel you. It sounded very, like, professional.
Oh, no, it's almost like I'm a professional actor.
We hang out. It's easy.
I know.
Like, I forget
it's easy to forget.
Like that.
No, it's super easy to forget because even in real life, when I hang out with like actors, like I have friends who have like worked in like professional feature films. Like I know people who know like celebrities, and we hang out casually, and it's super easy to forget. Oh yeah, you were in freaking Superman.
Yeah.
Like, huh.
It's just a difference between like hanging out with someone when they're like turning the performance thing on. Also, you have so many great different voices. There was this fucking like when the teacher was telling the kid like, now you'll be going to be the only one without a balloon. There was so much sass in this one line. I'm like, this lady's kind of a bitch.
And then you remember, wait a minute, this lady is Xander.
It's almost like I'm a master of weaving a tale.
It's like you're a master of being a fucking woman.
I will say that for the writing, I love the fact that, like, I feel like it was pretty easy to tell, okay, this guy's definitely stalking this kid. These pictures are surely of this kid. Like, it's pretty easy to figure out the twist. But the writing and the build-up is so masterful that it doesn't fucking matter.
No, it doesn't.
Which is really great.
This book series, well, not book series, this book, Penpal, I mean, it started... Because, like, okay, couple things. If you want a good resource for a bunch of freaking horror stories to read through, the no sleep subforum of Reddit is A+. Speaking of,
that's where I got my B story from.
That's where I got the B story from, because I linked to that. If you want more shit like this stream, but actually done professionally with paid actors and audio editing, like, they have a no sleep podcast where they pretty much make audio versions of no sleep stories. It's like the Twilight Zone for your ears, and it's great. But Penpal, the series was a series of posts on no sleep, like so many years ago. I think this was back in like 2012, or like 2011, 2012. I think is when it was posted on no sleep, and like it is. To this day, the only story I've read through where I was like visibly like shaking and terrified to just... I read the story in broad daylight, but by the end of it, I had a blanket wrapped around me, shivering, not because I was cold, but because I was so fucking anxious. Oof. And then it became super popular, so he kickstarted a book for it, and it got funding, so he published it as a book.
Which is kind of fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Oh, all of the best like no sleep stories usually get published into books by the authors.
Good.
Nice.
There's another one called, the book is called Stolen Tongues, but I believe the original Reddit title was My Romantic Cabin Getaway with My Fiance Has Gone Horribly Wrong. I think that was the title or something. I might read that one on stream one day. We shall see, just for funsies. Nice. But
that doesn't sound too bad.
No, but that No Sleep Podcast did do a professional production of that story on there. Well, so the way the No Sleep Podcast works is that there is, like, you can listen to like an hour of the podcast for free. It's on the podcast market. You can just download it and like listen to like 2 or 3 stories. It's a good way to spend an hour. The podcast in full is like 2 hours long, and they only give, you can either buy the full episodes or subscribe to their season pass to access like all of the details. Unfortunately, the Stolen Tongues series is part of the purchased ones, so I'm gonna have to buy those. But yeah.
Very neat.
The next obligatory step is to talk about Moon's performance.
Let's talk about bees.
No, don't worry about the bees.
Yeah, know what? You guys here in the Discord call could not hear the bee sound effect because I wasn't playing it through Sirenscape. I was playing it through YouTube. The chat could definitely hear because everyone was freaking the fuck out.
Yeah,
I didn't hear the bees. I was like, oh man.
I was in the I was watching through the stream itself just because my computer's being a dick. And oh my god, the bees! Oh, the bees!
The bees!
Oh, the bees! The bees! They're in my mouth.
Yeah, the imagery in that one was like,
and the way you portrayed it, ooh, to make the narrator sound scared. Oh, it wasn't just some narrator recalling shit.
Yeah,
reliving that shit. Oh, you did that very fucking well.
It was very in the moment, and you put so much personality into the narrator. It was like they felt like a real person. It was very, very good.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I tapped into memories of waking up with ants on me.
Oh, damn. Thank you for the bits, Draco.
Oh, thank you for the bits. Thank you so much.
Shit, that's terrifying. But
it's okay that you missed our stream, Draco. We're grateful that you're here.
Yeah. Plus,
they're all doing well, Draco. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was for certain moments. I just kind of like, because we have a bunch of ants under our house. Like there's like 6 colonies of ants under our house.
No,
awful. I know. But like, this hasn't happened in months. Like in like months, I mean like well over a year. But like, I woke up with like ants in my bed, and they were like crawling on me, and like the sense of like panic and anxiety that I felt in that moment, because I really, really fucking hate ants.
Same.
Like, I absolutely despise them. And I've kind of come to kind of live with them now, because every now and then I'll see an ant on my desk, and I promptly just give it a good old whap or two.
Whap or two, yeah.
Yeah, a whap or two.
It was good shit.
I had a similar. I used to live in this house that was just infested with carpenter ants, and every single. Now, carpenter ants are the best because they don't die from regular ant traps, and also every spring a bunch of new queen ants are released out, so they have fucking wings and they can fly, and they go out to try to make new hives, and they fail, which is which is just the worst. And you want to know what? They were on my side of the house, so that meant they were all over my room, and mostly my room. So I also woke up with ants on me, and I had like. So this room had like a door that led out onto the roof, so I had the door taped up because it was really drafty. And there were ants that would crawl in and get stuck in the tape, and then they'd just die. Like, oh no, I can't start my fucking hive now. No, you can't, you. And also, they'd just be everywhere. And one time, like the first time I moved in there was like one like on this carpet, and I went to kill it, and I didn't hit it hard enough. Like it was placed in just such a way on the carpet that it was cushioned that I couldn't kill it right away. And I just felt like I was in some kind of dramatic movie, like, why won't you die? As I'm like desperately, crying to myself, please make it stop. It was ridiculous. Anyway, the point is, carpenter ants are the worst, and bugs are the worst, and I hate it.
Yeah. They're always awful. Oh man, God.
I think the closest thing I've come to that is being. I think the closest thing I've ever come to that kind of experience is waking up covered in lizards. But that was just a great experience.
Oh, I see.
I love lizards.
These are domesticated lizards.
Okay.
I was visiting a guy who had a reptile house, and the fucker just decided, hey, while this guy's napping on my sofa, I'm just gonna open all the fucking cages and cover him in food.
Nice.
Nice.
Now,
That's really funny, but dangerous. You could have rolled over on one of the boys.
my friends,
I watched
I think it is time to wind the evening down and say good night to our fellow viewers, don't you think?
Hold on. We haven't talked about Kristen's story
Oh
yet.
no, I'm pretty sure we yelled at Kristen for a good 10 minutes.
We did, but I would like to call attention.
But reiterating is definitely not a bad thing.
Yes,
Like,
I would love to
the
call attention
writing.
to the fact that the suspense
Oh,
and the writing itself was fucking genius, and I liked how it kept calling back to how much time has gone by, and it was really just so cool. It was so amazing. Oh shit! Hey Kyle, what's popping?
Hey,
It almost
Kyle.
makes up for the fact that you're a piece of shit. Almost. Almost. It doesn't, but it almost does it.
Not entirely.
It was
Not you, Kyle.
It was
Kristen.
really interesting reading Kristen's story because it's just like, oh hey, this is devolving into madness, and then it really devolves into madness. But
Just drove me insane.
just quick little tangent. I wanted to do this because I'm a fucking dense motherfucker. Is I've been learning how to play the ukulele. And so I wanted to like horribly strum this out real quick just because it came to my head and I think I'm funny, which is
Oh no.
It's spooky time. Come on, grab your friends. Going to very scary lands with hold on, wait, what the fuck? Hold on, where's the chords? With
You know, your idea is solid.
well, fuck. With Phil and Kristen and Xander and Moon. The fun will never end. It's scary time. Okay, moving
You
on.
nailed it! You did it!
Fuck, go away.
You know, I would clap, but that was awful, so I'm not gonna.
It was terrible. When I say I've been learning the uke, I mean I've been learning the uke for about 2.5 days. The only other thing I know how to play on the uke is this so far. Here, let me strum this out real quick. Two lovers forbidden from one another.
Is this the fucking secret tunnel song from Avatar: The Last Airbender?
People, and a mountain divides them apart. Build a path to be together. And then I don't remember the next few lines, but then it goes, secret tunnel! No, I'm done.
Thank you so much for the bits, Kyle.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the bits.
Oh,
That's a lot of bits. Thank you.
That's a lot of bits.
In real world dollars, isn't that like money? Nice.
Yes. That's
Listen,
some legit money.
Listen, Kyle.
Give me a number, you cucks.
I won't.
5,500 bits.
Because I talked about bees in my story. You missed it, but it's okay. You can view it on the YouTube once we upload it.
Yep.
But anytime you just want to like stick bits to my body and pretend that they're bees, I'll fucking pretend that they're bees. I'll do whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want with those bits.
As they cast the bees at you and you like stripper pose, but it's like horror stripper pose. Oh no, not the bees.
Oh no. Not the bees.
Oh, let me just practice my Nick Cage impression.
Not the bee.
Nah.
How do you guys feel about that meme? Do you feel like do you think it's got, like, I know it's old enough that, you know, it's dead, but do you feel it's gotten to the point of being a classic yet, or do you think we still need time?
Oh, it's absolutely a classic meme. If you
think
say, no, not the bees, everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone's got to know. It's like you mentioned Breakfast Club and people just kind of like throw a fist in the air. It's like that kind of like iconic. That shit's iconic. Nick Cage
I haven't
has
actually
a
watched
lot
The
of
Breakfast
iconic.
Club yet.
I really recommend it. I think it's actually a really nice. It's a really nice movie to watch.
Like, to be honest, I only found out last year that it's not about breakfast.
Oh no, not at all.
I love that movie. It was like there's so many movies I gotta show you, Phil. Like it was like only a few months ago that I first introduced you to The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, you did.
Big Lebowski
Actually, yeah, Big Lebowski was great. But the thing is, like, for the last, I don't know, however fucking long that I was aware of The Breakfast Club, just from context clues in the fact that I only saw some pictures of it and the fact it was called The Breakfast Club, I assumed it was like a really shitty 1960s style breakfast show Like a long-running series that just picked up fucking traction because old white women like to watch show about breakfast. I was like,
I definitely assumed it. I thought it was some kind of romantic comedy about like some people who worked at a diner or hung out at a diner every morning or something for years, and then I saw it and it was great. Yep, it was a good time.
Well, friends, I have to call it a night, and I'm hosting the stream, so that means
All right, cool.
we all have to call it a night.
Calling it a night.
Unfortunately.
Fucking quitters.
I know. Bless you. Well, thank you all for watching. So,
thank you for watching, everyone.
We're gonna do this again sometime. We'll schedule it. We'll let y'all know, and we'll bring more scary stories, and we'll see where it goes. So, good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in.
Good night. Love you all. Bye.
Domo arigato.
Bye.